Hey guys, it's 7 o'clock. Actually, it's 2 or 3 minutes after 7 o'clock. I've posted a video tonight up on my channel. We have a supercharged cam test on a 4.6 liter 2-valve Ford. And before everyone jumps all over me and tells me you need to just LS swap that thing, that's 4.6 or 2-valve motors are terrible. The reality is they sold millions and millions of those motors. They ran them since, I think, way back as far as 1981 or 1991, and they ran them all the way to, somebody correct me, 2003 or 4 or something, before they introduced the 4.6 liter 3-valve motor. So they made them for a long time, and they made a lot of them in a lot of different motors. And one of the interesting things, yeah, what's up, Mike? Escuela Vieja, old school. I like that. That's one of my favorite things. One of the things that I want to let people know is, unfortunately, this is the internet. And what everybody says is they go on the internet and say, well, why would you even upgrade that motor when you could just swap it? Go get a cheap junkyard LS, which obviously is always a good opportunity. But the reality is most guys are not going to swap their motors. If they have a motor in the car already and it's running, that's a really, really good start. So if you add cylinder heads and camshaft and boost, obviously, all of that's really good. It's really easy to make power. That really is much easier than swapping a motor, because if you have a Mustang, let's say that you have a PI headed Mustang and you go to swap an LS motor, and everybody says, oh, but the motor only costs a few $100s or whatever. And while a 5.3 from the wrecking yard is a good upgrade to a 4.6 liter 2-valve, it's a lot more work than people tell you. Sure, the motor only costs sometimes a few $100s if you get from the wrecking yard, but there's a lot more stuff that has to go into it than that. You have to obviously have the transmission. And if it's a 4L60E, you have a questionable transmission. You have to have a different drive shaft. You have to have all of the computer stuff that goes along with it, the harness. You have to have mounts. You have to have a lot of things that make that swap not a $250 swap. It never is that. So the reason that I do a lot of this testing with a Buick 455 or a 500-inch Cadillac, or coming up, we have a 4.2 liter Atlas motor. And the reason that we would do that stuff is because there are lots and lots of guys that have those motors. And so how do we make more power out of the motor that we have, as opposed to go ahead and swapping something? So that's why I did this 4.6 valve. I happen to be a 4.6 valve owner back in the day. I actually had a 98 Mustang, which I ended up getting in a wreck in. So that's a whole other story, which was totally fun because I got hit from the side and it broke the window and hit me. And, you know, there was all kinds of excitement going on there. But I had a non-PI motor, and my goal at the time when I had that car, I was doing a series of stuff for Muscle Mustangs and Fast Swords, and I wanted to try to make 300 horsepower at the tire using a non-PI combination. That is a lot easier with a PI head and a PI intake and all the stuff that's available for PI motors. But no, Richard, had to be difficult. I have to make that with a non-PI combination. So it made my life much harder. As a matter of fact, I had to make my own intake manifold, which was kind of cool. But it took a long, long time and a lot of work to make my own intake, to make it better than the stuff that was already available. I ended up doing it NA. We made over 300 at the tire, which was really cool. But it's not something I would recommend. You would be much better off just getting a PI motor and swapping that in, running ported heads, running a camshaft, and better yet, just running some kind of boost, whether it's from a supercharger or a turbo, anything that's really good. And that's what we ended up doing after I did the 300 horsepower at the tire adventure, naturally aspirated. I put boost on it. We put a Kenny Bell on it. And then all of a sudden, voila, we had like 100 or 200 more horsepower. And the thing was so much funner. And then I got in a wreck in it, which was maybe my first one, I think, that I've been in my life, and ended up hurting the car, and it was destroyed, and then it could never be used again. But I digress. We were successful in the NA combination, having the Kenny Bell in it. The thing finally made power. And so that's why I did one of the reasons that I did this test. So we had a non-PI short block. We had ported PI heads from Total Engine Airflow. We had comp cams, the 274 cams, which I also ran in my car. And by the way, I kind of would not recommend those unless you're like hardcore and care about all the top end power, because the drivability on those is not great and you lose low speed power with the 274 cam. I would recommend the 262 cam and the AH. PI cam, which has higher lift, and the 262 has less duration than the 274 cam. Obviously, PI heads and PI intake manifold, and then add boost to that, and everything works out great. And it would have been even cooler to add a turbo to that, because we would have had a lot better like average power production than the centrifugal blower. I like the Vortec stuff. I ran a Vortec on my 5-liter Mustang for years and years and years, and it was fun. And I thought it was the fastest thing in the world until I actually got in a turbo car and realized, hey, this has like all of that boost that's at the top. It also has that in the middle, which makes a lot better average power. So it was cool. So let me know what you guys think about the 4.6 valve testing. And we were able to get 100 horsepower from a cam swap. So is that just like BS? Is that just clickbait stuff? It's not. I mean, it's easy to get that kind of power gain under boost. So if you have a stock cam and you're running boost, if you run like on the centrifugal blower, we ran a certain pulley ratio. So we ran that blower with that pulley and ran it, and it made like 13 pounds. When you put a cam in it, the boost drops, the power goes up, and all of a sudden you look like a hero, and the camshaft worked, made a ton of power. Because if it makes 50 or 60 horsepower, which is not unusual for a cam swap, even on a 2-valve, especially one that has a ported head, then all of a sudden you make more than that under boost, because we were getting up near 13 pounds, which is getting up near doubling the power output. So all of that stuff worked off. Yeah, my shirt. The other guys, what's up? So all of that worked out great. So again, that's why I do that stuff. That's why I do the different motors, because everything isn't about swapping. Sometimes it's just about improving the thing that you have. Everything that we have, we want to make better. And that's what I want to show guys. And that's often why a lot of guys ask, well, why do you have so many problems with valve springs, or why don't you put the right camshaft in there? All those things, because all of those are mistakes that everybody makes. So I want to show you what happens. You guys make those mistakes. I make those mistakes. But more importantly, I want to show you how we fix those mistakes when we do that. And John's back in the house. Squirrel John is back in the house. So let's go back here and see what's going on. Mod motor content. Admiral's excited about the mod motor content. And it's 2-valve stuff. Yeah, the 2-valve was in pickups for a long time, and it was also in the Crown Vics and all of that stuff all the way back to '99, because those cars got the PI stuff long before the Mustang did. Oh, 2012 is that far up? Yeah, that's nice. Wow. So Dom's telling me that Dom, are you like Fast and the Furious? Is telling me that they had it in Econoline vans until 2018. That's pretty cool. I don't know when they continued making the V10, which is another motor that's on the big list, and I definitely want to test one of those. But they soon switched over to the 3-valve, which obviously is a better choice, because a 3-valve head makes a lot more power than a 2-valve head does. Yes, Tim, I agree. The only question about a 406 is when it will break, and I have my fingers crossed on mine, because it's starting to slip maybe occasionally every now and then, and it's just all stock. So what else we got? Yes, chicken fingers. Don't forget to push the like button. Everybody needs to like this. Otherwise, I feel like I maybe shouldn't be doing this because nobody likes it. Cody wants to see a 5.4 2-valve Big Bang. I don't think I've ever run a 5.4 2-valve. I've run 5.4 4-valve stuff, because we've done lots of Navigator stuff, and Sean Hyland supplied us a motor that we did a bunch of testing with. But I don't think I've ever run a 5.4 2-valve. Josh, that was a pretty good swap. I'd have to say I'm sure that was a big step up. Josh said that he swapped a non-PI 4.6 for a 496 big block in their 98 GT. I'm sure the 98 Mustang GT ran a lot better with a 496 big block in it. Joe wants to know where the 429 is. It's actually still sitting on the engine stand at my buddy Mark Sanchez's house. I haven't run anything with that, but we are going to. Tom wants to know what PI is. It's power improved or performance improved. That's just what they called it when they stepped up from 98 to 99, when they had all of the upgrades to it. They put a different cylinder head, a different intake. They changed the compression. They changed the camshaft. And it went up from 225 horsepower to a whopping 260 horsepower. Unfortunately, the Chevy guys had more power than already. Joshua wants to know, have you ever used a Torque Tech kit on a 2-valve? I'm not actually familiar with that. And I thought that I knew all, I mean, I wrote a book on modular performance, including the 2-valve and the 4-valve stuff, but I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, Admiral, the non-PI heads are not great. Yeah, I even ran a lot of ported ones. I even ran some PI or non-PI heads that were converted to run a PI intake manifold, which the PI intake manifold is a big step up in power from the non-PI intake, because the non-PI intake is much longer runner length. But that combination didn't turn out to work out very well. So Cody wants to see what a 5.4 2-valve will make with all the boost. We've done over 1,000 horsepower with 2-valve turbo stuff on a 4.6, and we've done over 1,000 horsepower with a 5.4 2-valve. And Mahovitz has done way more than that on 5.4 4-valves, both blowers and turbo. So we know that they'll make a lot of power. I don't know what a 5.4 2-valve will make. My suspicion is that a 5.4, even with a ported 2-valve head, I do like the trick flow heads. I especially like the ported trick flow heads. They work very well on the 2-valve stuff. So on a 5.4, you should be able to make pretty good power. I've made almost 500, and I know lots of guys have made more than that on 2-valve motors. I've done it on 4.6 2-valves. So on a 5.4, I would think that you could make quite a bit more than that. Isaiah, what's up? Let's see what kind of question you got here. Will you ever do a build on a Ford 2.8 liter V6? That'd be mint. Are you talking about the 2.8 liter that they used in the old Capris, which I really, really love, like early to mid 70s Capri? Those are super cool. I had a buddy of mine back in high school that had one, and he did a Holley carburetor on, he did headers, and he did a few things to it. And I really, really like those body styles. So if you're talking about that Ford, I'd love to do one, because I think that those are very cool. I'd like to have that car actually more than anything. Jason wants to know, does the non-PI block with PI heads trick work with a 6.8 V10? I don't know if the V10 ever came with non-PI heads. Does it? Does anybody know? I don't know, I don't know enough about the V10s. Did the V10 actually come with non-PI heads, or was it only offered with PI heads? I know that they had 2-valve and 3-valve versions, but I don't know what the 2-valve difference was if they had a non-PI and a PI version of the V10. 65 wants to know, have you run enclosed carbs with boost? Yes, we have. I've run lots of carb enclosures from Vortec and Paxton where the carburetor is actually enclosed. That way you can run a standard carburetor, because the whole carburetor has pressure to it, not just the bowls. I mean, not just running a carb enclosure on top of it. The whole thing has, so the pressure is equalized. So basically it acts like a regular carburetor. The only thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that you have your regulator boost reference so you can fill the bowls under boost. But otherwise, we run standard carburetors. Back in the day, we used to run Mighty Demons on them, and I've done lots of that stuff, and it works fairly well. The V10 3-valve does not have variable cam timing. That's right. It only the 4.8 or the 4.6 and the 5.4 have variable cam timing, not the V10. Richard, how do you make a 3-valve 5.4 bulletproof? I've heard that, I haven't run those, so I'm not that familiar with them. I've heard they had problems with the threads in the head, so that you have to do inserts or something in them. They have RP heads that you do to any modular Ford. Given the power output that the guys have made with those, I like the 3-valve stuff. Oh, my connection is unstable. Really? Now's the time to do that? I like the 3-valve stuff because they flow a lot more than a 2-valve. And when I've run stock 3-valve motors, which I've run a lot of them on the 4.6 liter, they make a lot more power than the 2-valve does. Yo, Matt Mullins in the house. Let's see, SRT8 Edge Racer 99. Have you ever done a 6.2 Boss build? I have not. Out of an F250. I don't know that I may have seen some on the chassis dyno, but I've never run one on the engine dyno. Lipton wants to know, and I'm curious about this question. What's better for boosted turbo, front throttle or middle? I don't know what you mean by that. Be more specific about your question. Are you talking about the throttle placement on the intake manifold? If so, let me know. Matt, it's all going good tonight. Let's see. Hello, Richard. What kind of cam would you need on a 4.6 4 valve? I'm assuming 4 or 4.8 S to make peak power between 78 and 8,000. You need more than a camshaft. You need a camshaft, and you need ported heads, and you need a very short runner intake to push power production out at that RPM. Like for a 4.8, a short runner intake like the Holley short ram or a BTR kind of thing. And then with a 4.8, that wouldn't be too hard, because then you could run if you had ported heads on it, and then if you had a camshaft that was like, I don't know, I'm thinking 231 to 235 with that short runner stuff, it would easily make peak power at 7,500, because we know a 224 cam will make peak power at 7,000 or 7,100. So just popping in to say hi. These 4.6s are tough. I've been nursing a head gasket leak for 7,000 miles. That's a long time. On a 99 P71 beater with the heater. Looking for a KA24DE, but it's basically half a V8. Is that the Nissan motor that you're talking about? I actually have head gaskets and head studs for those. If so anybody has one of those, let me know. I was going to run one on the engine dyno. We never ended up doing it. The TorqueTech kit is basically an intercooled intake manifold that allows you to put superchargers that fit a 4V onto a 2V, such as the Eaton 112. Okay, I haven't seen that. But if you're putting an Eaton 112 on a 2-valve, it works good. I ran one of the Ford racing kits, and that video is up right now if you take a look at that, but it did not have an intercooler. It had the intake manifold was kind of a longish runner with the manifold casing. They basically inserted the Eaton rotor pack into the manifold, which is very common. The guys from Magnuson did that a lot on different things, TRD. They did some for Toyota, and they did that one for Ford Racing, but it's no longer available. But having the Eaton blow into an intercooler would obviously be a good idea, just like the 03 Cobra stuff did. And I have that from the Cadillac going on a 4.8, and I'm hoping to run that this weekend. Hobbs wants to know, do you have to support the lift with 270 cams on a stock 2-valve heads? I don't really understand the question. If you're putting cams in, you have to have valve spring to go with that. Stock cams, you can run all of these lifts. As a matter of fact, I have another video that I'll do where I ran all of the non-PI cams and all of the PI cams all in the same combination. I need to look, but I think that was done with ported PI heads. Okay, Lipton, you want to know a carbureted intake or a front intake on an LS. There isn't a better throttle position. The big difference you're going to see is the difference between those intake manifolds. So if we were to, for instance, I ran a good example would be I ran the Holley high ram. They have different lids for the high ram. They have a lid that has a front mount, more traditional style kind of LS type intake. Or a lid with a front throttle body, 102 or 105 millimeter throttle body to mount on that. I compared that to, they also have a lid where we can run two 4150 throttle bodies on top of that, or two carburetors on top of that. The carburetors made the most power. The 4150 throttle bodies made the second most, and then the front throttle body made the third most. Not because of the position of the throttle body, but because of the airflow. The two 4150 throttle bodies flowed 2,000 CFM, and the front throttle body flowed, I don't know what 105 millimeter throttle body flows, maybe 100, maybe I don't know, maybe like 1,200. So it's just an airflow thing. Karen's in the house. I don't even have a 50% like ratio. Man, I'm just feeling hurt. Yeah, Joshua, I've never seen any of those Ford Racing Superchargers. That test was from a long, long time ago, years and years ago, and I haven't ever seen it, one of those, even for sale used. Will we ever see a DCOE or IDA testing? I have done downdraft manifolds, but we don't normally put Weber carburetors on them. Normally we run them as stack injection with fuel injection on them. I haven't run the carburetor stuff. I've run a lot of DCOE side draft stuff on, back when I did my Datsun Z stuff. All those worked pretty well, but I haven't done any of that on the engine dyno. Randy, have you done compound boost on the 3.8 yet? I have not. We haven't even got it running yet. Marty says, a good buddy and I are going to LM swap a 93 Caprice. That's good. Budget turbo build, stock exhaust manifolds, and China GT45. All of that stuff is good. So Marty wants to know, I have no issues with calibration, but my question is, would you recommend anything else like spring, retainers, cam? Yeah, if you're doing I think you were doing the LM7, I would definitely put a cam in it. If you want to make power, you'll make a lot more power with any kind of camshaft that you put in an LM7. The stock cam works good on the stock motor, but any cam is going to be a big upgrade. Even a small cam is going to be 40 or 50 horsepower gain NA and more under boost. So, and I would do springs. At the very least, you should do LS3 springs, but I would do something better than that, a dual spring or another higher rate beehive spring. Kai wants to know, have you done a live chat about 464 valve? No, but if you have a question, you can ask a question about any kind of motor here. So I've done testing on lots and lots of 464 valve stuff. Lipton wants to know, sorry, is the carb intake better because the runner to every cylinder is the same length? A carb intake is not like that on almost any motor. On a carb intake with a centrally located carburetor on a V8, the outside runners are longer than the inside runners, so the runner length is not equal. You can have the runner length be equal, in which they do like on a high ram intake, on a tunnel ram style intake, then all the runners are the same length. And that's why a tunnel ram, one of the reasons that a tunnel ram makes more power usually than a single 4-barrel does. Mike Bill, if you have to choose for a swap, LS or Gen 3 Hemi, both of those are good. You can make the power that you want out of either one of those. So you have to decide which one's easier from a transmission or calibration or wiring, that kind of standpoint. Either one of those make really good power. Karen, I've never done a 4.6 Big Bang. I did a completely stock junkyard 4.62 valve when we ran a turbo on it. Although we didn't run more than about 8 pounds, I think. We didn't ever do a Big Bang on it. Apprentice wants to see a Big Bang on a GM LP9 or LY7 V6. Wow, that's not even stuff that I've heard of. Maybe I need to do my homework a little bit more. Taco wants to know, have you tested a small block Chevy 305? Yeah, there's lots of 305 testing up on the dyno. We did some LB9 stuff. I've done some TBI stuff. I've done lots of carbureted stuff. We even ran the 4.3 L99. So I've done lots of the small V8 stuff. Why do so many hate the 4.6 valve B heads? Jason wants to know. One of the reasons is that they didn't offer a lot of different intake manifolds for those. I know that there are a few, but none of them that worked really great. I think Mahovitz is the only guy that really ran with the B head, and he made a bajillion horsepower out of it. but he didn't do it overnight. It took a long time. They flow well and they can make lots of power, but you know, Marty, what's up? But you have to really apply yourself to make the kind of power that you want. There's not a lot of good intake manifolds. And then when they came out with the 03 Cobra head, that works really well, the Navigator head. And then obviously the GT500 head works well too. I think you can make power out of all of them. I don't think there's a case where one of them is, you know, decidedly better that you wouldn't choose others if you have it. Ken wants to know, will a 4.6 valve car intake fit a 5.4 valve engine? It will not, because the deck height's different. So basically it's like the difference between a 302 and a 351. The intake manifold's wider on the 5.4. Brandon wants to know, how do you feel about a CAN 4.6 valve and a Saline supercharger? That works okay. We've run some cams on 4.6 valves and they work well. It's just like anything else that has VVT on it, though. Once you go up in camshaft, you have to go down in the adjustability of the cam. You basically have to put either limiters, or you have to eliminate the VVT portion altogether if you go with too much camshaft, because you run out of available piston to valve clearance. So then it just eliminates the coolness of the VVT, because you can't actuate it very much anymore, because you don't have enough piston to valve clearance to swing that thing the way that you would want to. Now you can improve that with an aftermarket piston that has valve relief, and then you can add more variable cam to that. Karen wants to know why 5-liter Coyotes are so loud. A lot of that has to do with the VVT stuff. The loudness of the motor, especially at wide open throttle, has a lot to do with the exhaust duration. So if you have more exhaust duration, you have a much louder motor. But I agree, all of the modular motors, I remember this back even when they were doing the 0304 Cobra stuff, that the modular motor sounds different. The exhaust note sounds different than an LS or a small block Chevy, or even a 5-liter Ford motor does. Nico wants to know, 408 Windsor, what head should I use, 195, 205, or 225? I don't think you could go too big on a 408 Windsor. If you have, especially depending on what camshaft you have, a 225 head will work fine on that. Go for broke, a 4.6 Continental front drive has tumble port 4 valve heads. Yes, you can find the 4.6 in a lot of weird stuff. Let's see, S10 issues, stock Gen 353, turbo 400, stock converter, have two GT3582s. Would one be better for daily driver than two? Two of those is like 1,000 horsepower or more. So if you don't need that power, one of those is going to be 500 to 600, although a GT35 is going to be a little bit restrictive on a 5.3. If you had a 4.8, I think that might be a better combination. I would say, depending on your power level, if you only want 500 horsepower, that's going to work good. If you want more than that, you're going to have to go with two. Richard, have you ever used a 6 or 871 on a 4.6 or 5.4? I have not run a positive displacement, an OG positive displacement blower on either one of those. We've run the Eaton stuff on those, like the 112s and 122s, but not a 671. Matthew wants to know a Roots on 15 pounds versus a turbo at 15 pounds. It depends on what turbo you're comparing it to, but the difference is going to be a lot. It could be 150 or 200 horsepower. Take a look at the video that I have up comparing the 4.6 valve, the 03 Cobra motor. We ran it with a Roots, a centrifugal, a twin screw, and turbos at the same boost level, and you can see the difference is a lot. Street Rat Garage, I bought a 72 Maverick from Roadkill. Nice. It's running a 302 stock engine. Can I get it 650 horsepower with boost without splitting the block? Yes, we've made that kind of power without splitting the block. I'm not going to guarantee it, and it depends on how you get it and what the tune is. If you get it with a turbo, the 650 horsepower is not going to be the problem. The 750 foot-pounds of torque that you make might be a problem. Will we ever see Manitou Black? Will we ever see some of the Euro V8? Interesting that you bring that up. I would really love to run a BMW V8 or a Mercedes V8. The other thing that I went down the rabbit hole today, because I'm a car guy just like all of you guys, is I was talking to somebody via email about 928s. And so I went down a rabbit hole looking at 928 motors, used ones, and trying to find one to run and figuring out trying a way to run a Porsche 928 motor and which one I would pick as a used one to run it on the engine dyno and then add twin turbos to, because every V8 needs twin turbos. So you think V8 immediately GT35s feeding that twin turbo. So 928 would be very, very cool. But again, it's just how much time that it takes to hook it up and get it running and, you know, get the right trigger wheel for the ECU and stuff. So I would love to do that, and I wish I had the ability to run all of these on the dyno, but some of them are more problematic than others. Let's see, Shadow Ops. Thank you for your service. Richard, do you have a video on identifying Gen 4 LSC rods? Mine is a 2007 Classic with an LR4. Is a Gen 3 timing cover, so most likely a 24X reluctor wheel. Yeah, if it has a timing cover that doesn't have a cam sensor on it, and it probably has a rear cam sensor. But if you look at a LS2, some of the LS2s came like that. They came with a 58X wheel, but they were Gen 3, Gen 4 hybrid. So they came with a combination of those. So you might have, the thing to look for is you might have Gen 4 rods in that, because that's the other thing that they do. They started putting Gen 4 rods in some of the Gen 3 stuff that still has a 24X. So I would look at the rod on that and find out. Cody wants to know how much spark retard is reasonable with high octane fuel. You got to be more specific about the question. Tell me about your combination, and I can tell you kind of where you need to be on boost and octane and timing. Mike wants to know what size is the 928 V8. Well, it depends on what year it is. It went from the smallest one, I think, was a 4.5 liter, and then the biggest one was a 5.4 liter, if I remember right. Right before they stopped making them, I think that they went as high as a 5.4 liter, and it was making 345 or 350 horsepower. So not a ton, but it was certainly a lot better than the older ones that were 216 horsepower. Admiral wants to know if we can break a 4.6 bottom end NA. I've never done that. We've made lots of power, and I've made 500 NA with them, and we've run them to 7,000. I haven't run them beyond that because we weren't making any power up there, but I haven't broke one. When you run your RB25 on the dyno, you can just add a 24+1 optical trigger disc to it. I think that's what we did. I think Eric got one for that, so we can run the Holly with it. Christopher wants me to do a big bang of a properly built 4.3 Vortec V6 with a single versus twin turbo. You don't really need to do both of those. I'd like to see what kind of power you can make with the right combination. The thing I'm worried about with a 4.3 liter V6 is that split crank. I think that that's going to be what breaks in that. I don't know about the rod. I don't know about the rods on those, but my suspicion is that the crank will be the weak link. Jonathan, what cam do you recommend for a 302 Ford rebuilding my Mustang motor? I always recommend the Extreme Energy 274 cam, unless you want to go milder than that, than a 258 or a 262 or 264, I think is the other Ford one for that. BCP 920 is a 5 liter. Not all of them are 5 liters. They had a variety of different displacements depending on the year. And Mike, yes, if you're asking about the 928 motors, they are double overhead cam, and then depending on which year it is, they also went to 4-valve motors. Some of the early ones were 2-valve motors. What is a better head for a 306 small block Ford and a turbo Fox body, a 170 or 190 cc? It depends on what head you're talking about. I would have no problem at all putting a 190 on a 306. You're going to turbocharge it. You're not going to be lacking for power. You're not going to be lacking for bottom end. Take a look at the video that I have up where I ran a 175 and a 195 and a 210 and a 225 all on a 306. And then we also did it on a 363. You're not going to lose anything going by a 190 or 195. Lumbee Warrior wants to see more Cleveland stuff. A 306 Cleveland or a 347 with 4V iron heads or aluminum eBay heads. I've run Cleveland heads on a few things. We ran them on that 400-inch, the 400M, and I know everybody tells me it's not a 400M. It's only a 351M, and the 400 is just a 400. I call it a 400M and will for my whole life call it a 400M because when I say that, people know what I'm talking about. They distinguish that from other things. But we ran it on that. I ran it on I think I ran 3V CHI heads on we made a cleave-ore basically. And I think that was a 410-inch motor or 408-inch motor. I ran those also on I think we ran the 3V Cleveland heads on also on the original Boss 302 that I did. I've done 351s. I've done 383, 351 Cleveland-based motors with the 4V heads. I've done a lot of those. I don't have a lot of them up though on the videos. Josh wants to see a Mopar 3.9 versus a GM 4.3 liter versus a Ford 4 liter under boost. Have you ever built a JC England? Have you ever built a high revving K24? Like how high do you want? 4-piston racing have one that revs a 9800, makes 1,000 horsepower. Those guys are really good at what they do. I don't have the money to build something like that, so we run stock stuff. I think we were up on the K24. We were up near 8,000, but I think that's as high as we ran that thing with the excuse me, with boost. And yes, I saw the K24 based V8. I even got an email from that guy, and I think that's just awesome what he's doing. A Big Bang on a Nissan 5.6 definitely would be cool. So Aaron, we're only at 68 out of 132. We're only at like 50%. C. Garris is a 4.6 worth the effort nowadays with coyotes finding their ways into the salvage yard. The coyote, I would get one from a truck, get the 5-liter coyote based motor from the truck because it's a lot less expensive. And like with the LS stuff, they made a lot more truck stuff than they made coyote Mustangs. So you'll find a 5-liter truck based coyote, and it will be less expensive than a Mustang based coyote engine. An Olds 403 would be awesome, Jess. Yes, Jasper, the 400M has Cleveland heads, but is a taller deck. It is a much taller deck than a 351 Cleveland. Trevor wants to see 1UZ stuff. I agree. Rick Bose rides a 502 with HE 351 VGs off of a 6.7 diesel. Can it make 1,000 horsepower? I've not tested that turbo, but I think that those whole sets can probably support that. Josh wants to know if I've messed with any Mercedes V8s. Only the guys at the show shop started getting into Mercedes when I was down there, and we put some Kleeman, I think, blowers on those Mercedes V8s, and they work really well. Mercedes makes good stuff. I remember taking a ride back when I was in high school. a buddy of mine had a 6.3 liter Mercedes sedan, and it was faster than my Camaro. And the 6.9 is even faster, and that was way back in the day. So those were probably like 300 horsepower motors, which was more than my Camaro was making at the time. So those are really good. Mercedes knows what they're doing, especially the AMG guys. When they apply themselves, they really make lots of power. I like all their forced induction stuff, both their blower stuff and their turbo stuff. I have not. I smoking choking once. Excuse me. Once enough. I've ever played around with a 3.7 Mustang. I have not. Although Mark Sanchez, I think, has one of those in a Mustang with a Pro Charger on it, and it worked really well. A 2V Aussie heads with a S475. And see, I'm still not convinced that a 2V head, certainly not a US 2V head, makes more power than a 4V head. I don't see that that's possible. An Australian 2V head with more compression or equal compression to the 4V head, I can see how that might be a little closer. But even then, does anybody know what a 2V head flows? I know a 4V head flows about 275. I can't see a 2V head flowing more than about 210 or 220. So I don't see how a 2V head makes more than a 4V head. And I know that some of the other guys that do testing and do videos and have a lot more support than I do have done that test. And I just don't agree with it. I don't think that that's what happens when you compare those two things back to back. Rodarty Garage, what do you think of trick flow cams from 4.6 valve instead of comp cams? I talked to Brian Tooley, who is the guy basically that designed those heads, and he said that head can use a conventional cam. It does not have to be a trick flow dedicated cam. And I see a lot of that because people tell me all the time, I have a carburetor cam or I have a rec port cam, and none of that is true. They have never tested those cams compared to another cam on the same combination or on multiple combinations. They just pick a cam that says, oh, this will work better for a carbureted combination. Honestly, a carburetor or a camshaft has no idea where it's getting fuel from. It doesn't know that it's a carburetor. I would be more inclined to believe if somebody said, hey, this camshaft works good with a single plane manifold because it's high RPM, and we also want to either enhance a high RPM with a cam, or we want to enhance mid-range power because the intake manifold is already doing the high RPM stuff, kind of like they do with a positive displacement blower like the LS9 cam with a positive displacement blower application. But this kind of thing that they're talking about, I don't think it's accurate. Yeah, the Aussie 2-valve head, Tim, are closed chamber, which is why I was talking about them, because they will have more compression than an open chamber US 2V head. And you can have 4V heads that are open or closed chamber. So we could do the comparison either way. But honestly, like I said, I don't think a 2V head competes with a 4V head unless you put it on a really mild application. But I'm really excited about the possibility of getting a 2.2 liter Chrysler. And the one that I think I'm going to get is the Turbo 1 motor, which is non-intercooled. And oddly enough, I've been doing lots of rabbit hole research on the 2.2 liter stuff. It's a draw through turbo. Now, it's not a draw through like a carburetor in front of the turbo, but the throttle body is in front of the turbo, which I think is just ridiculous because it makes the size of the throttle body much more critical. If you blow through it, then the flow rate of the throttle body artificially goes up. So, and on this Turbo 1 motor, the manifold, when they started out, they just basically did a big log style manifold, which is the dumbest thing in the world. You need to have runner length. And I read a lot of, I've been going back and reading a lot of information on this 2.2 Chrysler stuff, and they're saying, yeah, this one flows better than this one. And does nobody realize that the runner length is really what's making the extra power? If you take a log style short runner manifold off, and I make a manifold, which is what I'm going to do because it needs that, and put a manifold on there that has runner length, you'll improve the power not because of flow. You'll improve the power because you've added rudder length and you have reflected waves in operation even under boost. And the other thing, obviously, that I would do on that Turbo 1 motor is move the throttle body from in front of the turbo to behind the turbo on the manifold where it belongs, which I'm going to do all that stuff, which I'm really excited about. A 1.8 liter Hyundai Big Bang. I like the Hyundai stuff. My buddy Tom that used to work at Westech had some Hyundai stuff, and I think he got that thing to run 10s. It was a Tiburon, and it worked really well. Yeah, 2.2 Chrysler content. That's what we want. Racer D, for some reason your thing is hidden, and I will show it. But your the CHI 208 head works really, really well for a lot of stuff. Let's see, Kenny TV. We got a 2-valve question here of a 4.6 2-valve PI Windsor in an Expedition. I want to supercharge it. Would you recommend porting the heads first? You can just put the blower on the PI head, depending on how much power you want. Ported heads will help. The cam will help. The blower obviously will help. But if you're just going to drive it around and stuff, you can put a blower on and it will work just fine. But if you take a look at the channel, I have the Ford Racing supercharger, and we did a cam upgrade. So you can see what cams do on that. I didn't do ported heads on it. Festiva, yeah, now we're talking 59 horsepower Fury, which is more than the Metro XFI made, because I think that it was only like 57 or 58. Yes, Tyler, the 3800 where headers don't make any power. I'm going to test that. I ran it long ago. I'm trying to get my thing to focus again here because I'm out of focus. But I'm going to test that, and we'll test it with the blower, and we'll probably test it with the turbo as well. Air compressor boost, that would be interesting. Yeah, Jeff, what's up? Just wanted to buy you a beer. Lisa and I actually went out for happy hour tonight. It was awesome. We like getting out and getting away and being able to talk to each other and being grown up, and that's all cool stuff. Mike wants to know, what about Ford Thunderbird turbo coupe 4-cylinders? I did a lot of stuff testing with those turbo motors back when I was doing stuff with Dave at Tiny Avenger. He had an SVO Mustang, same kind of thing. We ran a lot of those turbos on Hondas. Actually, I did a big test where we ran the 0.48, the 0.63, and the 0.82 ARs on the hot side of those little T3 turbos, and they work really well. Straight from Sean Hyland's book. I want to just watch the video, some good information. I want a choppy idle and more top end. I'd probably get an LS or a Hemi if I want low speed power. The 4.6 2-valve then will work for you. Just I wouldn't recommend the non-PI cam. I would recommend the PI cams. Dom, what have you seen for hot oil pressure or idle at the 4.6? The 4.6 stuff always had good idle because it's got a giro rotor pump on it. It's gonna be 35 or 40 normally. Love to see a Hyundai 4.6 V8. We talked to the Hyundai guys about doing a land speed deal, and that V8 was something that we were looking at. It would be very cool. See, Garris got a Mercury Capri, nice. XR2, Swap Festiva, fun to play with the stock F bodies and Foxes. Those are cool. I really want a Festiva. I think that would be really cool. I think a Festiva with an LS in the back would kind of be cool. Cole wants to know, what are my thoughts on Edelbrock AVS2 carbs versus Hollies with the same CFM? Idle quality seem the best selling point, and maybe wide open throttle suffers. I don't think that AVS makes as much power as a Holly does at wide open throttle. We've seen fuel standoff on some of the AVS carburetors, but honestly, I don't normally pick those when we run full throttle stuff. I need to take a look at the carburetors that I have. We ran 2 carburetors, dual quads on the Hemi intake that I have, which I have up for sale. But I don't remember if they were AVS2s or not. Tanner wants to know the approximate compression ratio of a non-PI short block with PI heads is. I think it's close to 10-to-1. Reed wants to know what intake would you pair with a 2-valve 4.6 with trick flow heads on a stage 3 cam. If you're wanting to make a lot of peak power, then the trick flow intake is the way to go, or a bullet or something that's a short runner deal. Otherwise, most of the stuff that we ran was the PI intake, but I also made my dual plenum intake, which worked very well and picked up a lot of power. But it did what other manifolds do. It would trade power top to bottom. So if we shorten the runners, it would make a lot more power at the top. That's the manifold that we made for 88 or 490 on a 4.6 2-valve. Yeah, Kevin, Jay Leno shotgun was wild. I was at the show shop when they brought those in. They were pretty cool. The show shop did a lot of cool stuff. I got to ride in an SHO Taurus that was their stage 2 deal with a Vortec on it. And they had cams in it and springs and all kinds of stuff. And they were running that thing to 10,000 RPM. It was it was pulling really, really hard. What kind of power does a CAN 464V with B heads put down at the wheels? I'm putting one together with flat tops, 234 duration, 1/2-inch short runners. I don't think I've run one with that intake manifold, but we've run stuff with, I don't think I've run the B heads. I did a series for Muscle Mustangs where we ran the early motor with the B heads, but I didn't do ported ones, and we only did converted stock intake manifolds with short runners, but it never made power more than 7,000 RPM. When I did the FR500 intake with the other heads, we were going to 8,000, I think, with those. Kevin wants to know if I ever tried a Ford 2.5 twin plug with an SVO turbo. I did. We didn't ever try that. We did try a ported stock head, and that worked fairly well. Yeah, if you guys are here watching, asking questions, how about hitting the like button? It's really easy. Just go click, 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 click. It's very simple. We need a Ford 6.2 single overhead cam. I've never run one of those. Let's see. Dom wants to test setting up a centrifugal blower to the max rated RPM, but use turbo wastegates to bleed off boost in the upper RPM to achieve. We've done that. Or I say we, the guys from Real Time Racing, Petey Cunningham, did that on his NSX. Speed the blower up a lot because they were limited at the boost that they could run, and then regulate it with a gate. And you can do that, and it works. The problem is that you're spinning the blower really fast and not producing the airflow that you need, or most of the airflow is going away. It's not an ideal setup. It's actually better to put a restrictor in front of the superchargers to do that, but you can do it. Linwood, do you think that a 10.5-to-1 406 with Flowtech 180 heads and a Comp 280 224 duration is capable of 515 horsepower? I think it's going to be hard to get there with that. I don't know how well those Flowtech heads flow, but a 180 is pretty small for a 406. Do you run restrictors? By that I mean, I'm sure you mean oil restrictors. We didn't on the GT 3582s. The size of the turbo usually doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you run an oil restrictor. Usually that's a recommendation of the turbo, and some of them want that and some of them don't. Josh is out. What's up? A Datsun twin plug. Yeah, the K24 had a twin plug deal. The K24 Nissan motor, not the K24 Honda. The North Star was an evolution of the LT5. I bought a 98 Cobra 4.6 double over cam, brand new in 98, ran 13s in bowling green, stock with 28 slicks leading out of the rev limiter. My 0.63 valve feels faster. I think the 0.63 valve probably is. The machine shop is guaranteeing 515 horsepower. Has the machine shop spent a lot of time on the dyno? It may do it. I just don't know about that head. The KA24 is a Nissan. Yeah, we've run those. Reed wants to know, in your opinion, where do you draw the imaginary line in the sand when you build the bottom end of a 4.62 valve? I don't draw the line. I mean, I read Sean Hyland's book back when we were doing this stuff, and we took the junkyard motor and we just started adding boost to it, because I don't believe, just like I didn't believe with the Honda stuff before that and the 5-liter stuff before that, in any motor, when somebody tells me, oh, those are only good for 400 horsepower, I don't think the motor knows that. The motor knows when it has a bad tune, but it doesn't know that at 400 horsepower is the limit for a connecting rod or a crankshaft or a piston. I think that stuff, and that's what we showed with the Big Bang stuff, is that those things will take a lot more power than you think if you do everything right. And that's usually the critical thing. I did not do a video on the KA24. We did stuff on the chassis dyno with that, and we did some NA stuff, although it didn't make a ton of NA power. But we also ran turbo on it, and that obviously, like everything, helped quite a bit. Candy, do you do ring up on every engine? I don't. If you're only running 6 or 7 pounds, it's usually fine. Lots of blower kits go, and turbo kits, more blower kits really than anything, because those are the ones that people sell a lot of. Those go on motors running 6, 7, 8 pounds, whatever. And guys go out and run them a lot on stock motors, never taking them apart, and it works fine. It depends on how long you're at that boost level. And actually, on a supercharged motor, I tend to think that you could get away with more, although the charge temperature might be higher. And also, there's more parasitic loss driving the blower, so you're not actually making that power. You're making more than that. You're only seeing part of it. But it doesn't have the back pressure that a turbo does. And the back pressure, and if you have, especially if you have a lot of it, and the attending exhaust gas temperature tends to make ring gap more important on a turbo application. Mike says he's running 10 pounds on a stock on open 543 valve. Kenny Bell sold lots and lots of blower kits for 03, like on 03 Cobra stuff. We ran lots of boosts. We ran a lot more than that on some unopened stuff. They sold a lot of kits for 2 valves and 3 valves and 4 valves, and nobody opened those motors up. As a matter of fact, the guys at Kenny Bell didn't, and ran lots and lots of boosts to try to find out how much power they could make. And I kept telling them, if you're going to do the maximum boost stuff, you need to do ring gap. No, we want to do it on just a stock motor, just boost. I'm like, okay, well, that's dumb, but you can try it, because eventually what you're going to do is break a piston. UPS Mech, there's no article on the chassis dyno with the KA24. It's just something that we did with a customer. My 5.4 only has 18 pounds of idle and 40 at 1500. Are you, what does it do as you rev it up? Does it go up? Dale wants to know, I'm building a 4.8 Vortex, so how can I make 400 horsepower cheap? Just put a cam and springs in it and it will make 400. The way that we tested it makes 333 or so, and then if you put a good cam in it, it will make over 400. The Super Coupe 3.8 liter, those are kind of cool. Or you could just add boost. Yeah, I agree, Tim. I don't think a 351 LS is worth doing. There's way too many really good heads for a 351 Windsor to try to go through all the trouble of putting an LS just because you can. Frank wants to know how close to your dyno tune engines compared to finished street driving. They're not anywhere near that. The only thing that's done is wide open throttle. It idles and then it transitions from idle up to whatever our load point is. Let's say that we start at 3,000 RPM and go from 3,000 to 6,500. The top 3 cells on our Holley HP management system. So idle, transition, and then the top 3. And I can interpolate from there, but it's not anywhere by any stretch of the imagination tuned for street driving. I'm not a tuner and I don't do that. All I do is what I need to do to run wide open throttle. San Diego, what's up? If the F-150 544 Harley Davidson or Lightning is the same block as an F-150 2-valve Expedition, mine's broke. I don't know if they did a different block on the Lightning or not. I don't think that they did. I think that that's the same block. Your LS1 is making a whining noise. Take a look at the accessory stuff. Look at the accessories and then look for an exhaust leak before you think that it's inside the motor. And then if you hear a whining noise inside the motor, look at the oil pressure. Colby wants to know, I have about 3 minutes, so we got to make this quick. What's your opinion on, yeah, Nico, so 408, 225 head, cam needs to be solid or a certain lift. It doesn't need to be solid. You can run a hydraulic roller in that. That will work fine. It depends on how much power you want to make. Take a look at, Nico, take a look at the 408 testing that I did. That video is up on the channel, and we ran a couple of different cams, a mild and a much bigger cam, which is not terribly streetable. But I think both of those were hydraulic roller stuff, so you don't need to have a solid roller. And then Colby wants to know what's your opinion on 243 heads for a Gen 353. I'm doing a turbo build. Use the heads that you have. If you have 243 heads, they'll work fine. If you have 706 or 862 heads, they'll work fine. They'll work even better than the 243. They make more power than a 243 does. So you just use those if you have them. If you've already bought the 243s, they'll work fine too. What ring gap do you recommend on a 462 valve with a supercharger running 12 pounds? Just go up a good rule of thumb is about 7 thousandths or so per inch of bore. So on the small bore, I think that's a 3.5 inch bore. So if you multiply 7 times 3.5, you have your answer. Dom, I don't like 18 pounds of idle pressure in anything. I think that that's lower than it should be. Okay, Candy Misk, you have the last question of the night. Got a 98 GMC 5-liter Vortec. Do you have any early videos on mods? Let me go back here. Do you have any early video on mods for these engines and anything that you could recommend? Normally when we get those, either a 5-liter or a 350, the Vortec stuff, we'll take the intake off of it. Some guys have said that you can actually make decent power with that intake. I've never tested one. We always take that intake off and put a carburetor on, and that works really well. A carburetor and a distributor, usually we run a dual plane, and then you can do valve spring and a cam upgrade, and that works very well. So if you're going to stay with that intake manifold, there are bigger injectors for it. The throttle body size should be good. Do an air intake. Headers work well, or a mild cam also can work, but you are going to need to tune it after you do that. So let's see. Linwood, what's up? Fascist pendant. Time to hit the like button. Yes, everybody hit the like button. Thank you guys for showing up. I will see you tomorrow. I've got to get going. Make sure if you have not already, go look at the 462 valve blower cam upgrade, and let me know what you guys think of. Make sure to make some comments on it. Let me know about the 100 horsepower cam swap. You know, it's just boost. It all works well. Thanks, guys. I will see you tomorrow.